Hey guys, in this video, basically, I want to talk about qualification versus cost per lead. And this applies mainly to Facebook, although you can also apply this principle to Google PPC or any other form of marketing, really. But especially this is true of Facebook, and this is kind of the way that I look at things and how we go about doing our marketing. So when you are, so basically there's a spectrum, right? The more you qualify a lead, right, the more friction you put in front of that lead to before they actually submit and give you their information, the higher the cost per lead will be because the more you are weeding out people, right, from a potential audience. So the way that I look at it is, let's say that this is representative of a funnel, right? So if you have a wide if you cast a wide net in any given target market, that's what this wider area represents up here. And over time, as you qualify more, you're going to kind of narrow that down more and more to try to just get the people that you want here down at the bottom, right? So this is kind of the target market. And if you go down to the very bottom, I'll just put in another note here. Let's see here. This is going to be basically your ideal seller. Okay, so that's going to be at the very bottom. Now, so the more qualified they are, the more you qualify them, the more the cost per lead goes up. So we'll flip this around. So cost per lead generally goes up the more that you qualify the leads. So this is CPL, means cost per lead. So the way that we go about this specifically with Facebook is we will cast a wide net at first. So I will encourage, especially this is especially true right now with Facebook. If you target a wider audience, you're basically opening up the algorithm to more opportunities to come through the funnel, which gives us more data, which helps us to optimize faster and actually brings the cost per lead down. So that's another thing that applies here, right? So at first, right, you want to target as wide an area as you're comfortable, as you're able to. If you go narrower, you're basically opening up yourself to less opportunities because you're just focused on one small area. So the cost per lead in that case would probably go up, right? So we want to go wide there. We start with, we don't ask too many questions of the leads. We don't, at the beginning. So I like to keep the leads on the platform, right? So we're not sending them off to a landing page yet. Like all these different things, it's meant to try to open up the net as wide as possible, and not put a lot of friction at first for those leads to start coming through. What this helps us do is, like I said, it gives us more data points. We can see, as we're running the campaign, what's working, what's not. It helps us to optimize faster. Once we start to get some traction there, then we can start to introduce asking more questions on the lead form, or now we're sending the leads off to a landing page. And so this is kind of the process, right? So for Facebook, I like to start with lead forms, less questions. And then we could do something like maybe lead forms, more questions. And then what we're going to do is to qualify further, so now we're actually taking them off of the Facebook platform and we're sending them to a landing page. And again, we start with less questions maybe, and then we go to possibly more questions. So this is kind of the progression here. And so what we're doing is over time we're trying to ask more and more questions of the leads to get closer to this ideal motivated seller that we want coming through that funnel. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here is that the funnel itself is built. Some of them are built with a certain structure to try to get basically the main information up at the front, and then the farther they go through the funnel, the more questions we ask of them. Basically, like written answers would, for example, would be at the very end of the funnel, whereas just asking for the address, for example, is at the very beginning. So you could even say that our funnel itself is kind of a little mini funnel in it, like this, right? So our actual so as we go through this process, right, less questions on the lead form, then we ask more questions, then we go to a landing page maybe that has less questions, and then the final, the goal is to get to a landing page where we're asking much more questions of the leads. But even this landing page itself starts with less and then finishes asking for more. So it starts with less friction, and the farther they get into the landing page answering questions, the more and more we're asking of them. So again, we're really trying to narrow that down. This is kind of the idea and the process behind this. Now, again, the more that you go down this line here, generally cost per lead tends to go up because you are weeding people out. And that's the main idea. Now, what we do is we put a pixel. I'm going to put another text box here. So we put a pixel on the tracking. It's on the lead forms. It's also on the landing pages. We manually install it on the landing pages. But that pixel tracks who actually comes all the way down to here and becomes this motivated seller, right? And so what we can do is now we get that data. When we start getting enough of that data, we start feeding it back to the top of the funnel, so that now Facebook is looking at, okay, who's becoming this ideal motivated seller? Now we're going to show our ads to more people like that. Let's see if I can get another arrow here. And so, it begins to kind of start to look like, I don't know if I can bend this arrow, but it starts to kind of look more like this, right? So we start to feed those that data back to the top, and so it becomes a cycle. So people come in through the top of the funnel, which is very wide. We qualify them, and then we start getting the ideal person that we want, and then we're sending that information back to It's basically going back to Facebook and telling Facebook, look, this is who we're actually looking for. So then Facebook starts showing our ads at the top of the funnel to more people like that, and it's this cycle. And then, that's basically the idea of retargeting in one sense. Retargeting, you could say retargeting is several different things, but this is a form of retargeting and whatnot. So that's just one way to think about it. I'll just put this here. So this is how I look at things, how we do Facebook ads. This is kind of the process that I've found that works really well. And so there's several different spectrums to keep in mind here. This is the last thing that I'll talk about. Let's put in one more text box. So spectrums. So on the one hand, you've got a spectrum of targeting a wider audience than a narrow audience. So we'll say wider market versus narrow market. Okay, you've got the idea of, let me move this down here. We'll put it over here. So a wider versus a more narrow market. So we'll put it actually over here, because this is actually relates to cost per lead. So, so the wider your market is, generally the cost per lead is going to go down, whereas the more narrow your market is, the cost per lead will go up because you're qualifying more, right? Same thing with some amount of friction, right? So that's basically how much are you qualifying them, right? That's this idea here. The more friction, the more questions you ask of the leads, the more cost per lead will go up because you're eliminating them, right? You're weeding people out that you don't want. Another spectrum you need to think of is your your budget. So for example, if you have a higher budget, you can do more testing and more optimizations quicker, which might help bring the cost per lead down. Whereas if you have a smaller budget, you're getting in less leads over time, which means less data, which means that it's going to take longer to qualify and go through this process. So that's something to consider. And then the other thing is, even platforms, right? So even the platform that you're using. So this could be Facebook, Google, SEO, right? Different platforms will have different levels of qualification. So if a lead is coming through Facebook, if they've gone through our whole kind of system right here, eventually you have this system built and going that that's producing good leads. But let's say that you're starting with SEO or PPC, right, from Google. That already pushes the leads more towards the more qualified end of the spectrum anyways, just because those leads are already searching and looking for help. And so that that increases cost per lead, right? But that's another way to think about this in terms of spectrums, right? So all of these different things, this is how I approach and look at Facebook ads marketing, especially for sellers. Because a lot of people will ask me, like, what's the average cost per lead? What's the average this and that? I mean, there's so many different factors. The other thing is competitiveness of your market. If I can spell here, competitiveness of market. So if your market's really competitive, there's a lot more competition there. The average assignment fee may be higher. Like lots of people are already marketing in that area. That would push your cost per lead up, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind. These are all different kind of spectrums you have to keep in mind when you're kind of looking at, well, what is my cost per lead going to be and how qualified are the leads going to be? So this in particular, though, this is for Facebook. And I think we have a pretty good process here. This is what I use with my clients. Another question I often get is like, well, how long does it take to get this whole thing kind of going? Like, from maybe a lower cost per lead, but a less qualified. Like, how long does it take to go from that all the way down to starting to get these better, more ideal motivated sellers? And I mean, I would say that when we're first starting, we tend to we're getting leads in the first few days. We're starting up here, and then I would say, depending on how wide your market is and how much budget you have, right? Because that's going to affect how much data we have and how fast we can optimize. Then I would, if it's pretty quick, maybe a couple weeks, and we're getting to these landing pages, testing those out. If you have a lower budget in a very competitive market, for example, and its cost per lead on average is higher, it could take maybe 5 weeks, maybe a month, something like that. But really, I mean, on average, about 3 weeks to go through this. And then, maybe going into the second month, what we're doing is we're setting up, not just this retargeting going, back to the top of the funnel, but we're setting up retargeting ads specifically. And so that is basically where the people that have hit this landing page, and I'll make another arrow here. Basically, the people that have hit this landing page and hit that pixel, then we start to show them these other ads. And we do this across Instagram and Facebook. So that basically, if they've hit our landing page and then they happen to be scrolling on Instagram or Facebook later in the day, they're going to start seeing new ads from you on a cycle. So for example, like a week later after they've hit the landing page, they'll see one ad for a week. And then, another week they'll see another ad for a week. And if you have recorded video, or if you have video testimonials, those are great. It's basically like they may see a different video of you each week, a different video testimonial of you every week, after they've already gone through this funnel. So that's what we start, around month 2. We do, you need some data. Sometimes it's month 3, but usually around month 2 is when we ideally would start doing that. So I hope that this video makes sense. I hope that this gives you guys a good idea of kind of how to think about marketing on Facebook. And this doesn't just apply to motivated sellers. This applies to any industry. This is just kind of the way that Facebook functions. This is, there are plenty of other strategies, but I mean, this is just the way that I think about it. I try to make it a very kind of like logical, systematic approach. And so this is just what I've found to work well over time. And we're always constantly tweaking and improving this. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Anyways, have a great day, and we'll see you guys in the next video.